There are moments that last only seconds, yet echo for generations. This is one of those moments. A little boy stands frozen in the rain, 8 years old, unable to understand why the two people who have always stood between him and the rest of the world are now lying motionless on the ground. His father Thomas and his mother Martha are gone. Forever. Most people remember this as the night Batman was born. I'm not so sure about that. I don't know if Batman was born that night, but I do know that a wound was born. And that wound would spend the next 20 years learning martial arts, studying criminal psychology, mastering fear, building armor, and, most importantly, convincing itself it had become a man. But wounds don't disappear because you give them a cape. They simply learn how to hide. Tonight, we're not asking how Bruce Wayne became Batman. We know for a fact that Bruce Wayne was standing and breathing after the gunshots, but the question we're going to ask is, did Bruce Wayne ever survive that night at all? Welcome to Season 2 of Dark Margins. Last season, if you remember, we opened 10 case files. We examined revenge. And it wasn't revenge as justice or vengeance, but revenge as a force capable of reshaping the human soul. We watched men like Edmond Dante's Wade. We watched Medea burn. We watched Captain Ahab declare war on a creature that never knew there was a war. We watched John Newton awaken to the monster he had become. All those episodes dealt with revenge, and in this season we deal with obsession. But somewhere near the end of that journey last season, another question began to emerge. It was, what happens when the thing that saves you slowly becomes the thing that owns you? That question will trickle into this season because, if you think about it, obsession never introduces itself as obsession. It arrives calling itself something different. It's either purpose or justice or love or discipline or success. And by the time you realize whatever it was became an obsession, you've already built your life around it. Now this season, we're opening up 10 more case files, and it's not to discover who these people became, but to understand what they became obsessed with. Because every obsession begins by trying to solve a problem, but ends by becoming a problem. Tonight's case file, as you're well aware, is Bruce Wayne. Now, there's two things that I want to get into real quick. The first is, in order to simplify this episode and not make it a 20-hour episode, I had to figure out what people most know about Batman, and it's not the whole canon of Batman. Most people don't understand the comics. They don't understand the 60s TV show. They don't even necessarily understand the Pattinson Batman or the Michael Keaton Batman or definitely the Val Kilmer Batman. They understand Batman through the lens of the Dark Knight trilogy. So we're just going to stick with that. And for the Batman fans out there that want me to exhaust the canon, I apologize. Time prohibits me from doing that. And an even deeper apology to those serious Batman fans that can't stand the Dark Knight. I really do apologize for this. But in order to save us time, I wanted to focus on one particular aspect of Batman, and that was through the lens of the Dark Knight. The second thing I want to say is that in order to go forward, we need to forget everything we know about Batman. We have to just recall the boy standing in the alley after his parents had just been murdered. So please, forget the cape, forget the gadgets, forget the legend, forget everything you've ever heard about Batman, because none of it exists yet. Right now, as we said, we're standing beside an 8-year-old child whose entire world has just ended. And before we ask how Bruce Wayne became Batman, we have to ask a much more important question. What happened to Bruce Wayne? Now, in order to get into this, we're going to go over a little bit of psychology. For decades, psychologists believed trauma was simply something terrible that happened to a person. Then came a Dutch psychiatrist named Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. His fascination with trauma didn't begin inside a university, but it began inside of a country trying to recover from World War II. You see, van der Kolk grew up in the Netherlands, and this is just after the Nazi occupation. His father, in fact, had been arrested during that occupation. And like millions of families across Europe, the war had ended. But the trauma hadn't. Kolk spent his childhood watching people survive without ever truly escaping what they had lived through. And that question would become his life's work. After decades of research, he reached a conclusion that changed psychology forever. Trauma isn't simply remembered, it's actually lived. It changes the nervous system, it changes the body, it changes the brain. This is why I believe neuroplasticity in itself is one of the greatest paths mankind can study right now and help others, because it's that moment that can help a person rewire their brain. But when the trauma happens before a child's identity is fully formed, it doesn't simply become part of the story. It becomes the foundation the rest of the story is built upon. Now, think about Bruce Wayne. Every criminal he chased, every relationship he sacrificed, every broken bone, sleepless night, scar, decision. They can all be traced back to 30 seconds on one rainy night. The obsession that became Batman didn't begin inside of a cave. The obsession, or better yet, the wound that leads to the obsession that leads to Batman, began right there at that moment. The moment the pearl struck the pavement, the moment the gunfire faded. The rain continued to fall, the city moved on. But Bruce Wayne didn't move on. And that leaves us with the first question in our investigation. Was Bruce Wayne really fighting criminals, or was he still trying to save two people who had already died? Now, if you remember The Dark Knight, you remember young Bruce leaving home. There's cargo ships, foreign prisons. Then you get to the snow-covered mountains, the ancient monasteries. And you also remember his hands being wrapped in cloth, bruised knuckles. It was years passing without a single word. Most of us look at Bruce Wayne's training and we see discipline, dedication. We see sacrifice. But I see a promise. It was a promise made by an 8-year-old boy to himself standing in the rain that no one can ever make him feel that helpless again. It's about not having to relive that trauma ever again in his life. And it probably can be brought into no one will ever feel this helpless again. Now, think about the beauty of that promise. There's actually nothing wrong with it. It's everything that's healthy in humanity. In fact, every firefighter's made that promise. Every police officer, paramedic, parent, teacher, they've all made that promise. And at its best, that promise is called purpose or vocation. It's a calling. But if you're not careful, you're going to find that purpose has an evil twin brother, obsession. And from a distance, they look exactly alike. They both work hard, they both sacrifice, they both stay up late, and they both refuse to quit. The difference is almost invisible. Until it isn't invisible, and then it's blaringly obvious. Bruce Wayne doesn't spend a few months learning to defend himself. He disappears for years. He studies criminals because he never wants to be surprised again by a criminal. He studies fear because fear once owned him. He studies escape because one night there was nowhere to escape to. There was nowhere to run. And lastly, he studies combat because the last time violence found him, he was too small. He was unable to stop it. Every lesson is a response to that night. Every bruise is a conversation with his past. And every scar is another attempt to rewrite a memory that can't be rewritten. Now let's go down a rabbit hole real quick. We're going to talk about the difference between strength and the obsession to become invincible. There's a story that perfectly illustrates that difference. It's back in 1993, McNichols Arena, UFC 1, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. There was a man whose name was Hoist Gracie. He He wasn't the biggest man, and he wasn't the strongest, and quite frankly, he didn't even look that intimidating. But one by one, he defeated every opponent. And these opponents outweighed him by 50 and even sometimes 100 pounds. And after that night, after Royce Gracie became the victor, it was at that moment the world had just met Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And today, the Gracie family is huge, and not just in their legendary status, but they also have a very large family. One of their family members, actually two of them, they're Royce Gracie's nephews. There's Henner Gracie and Hiron Gracie. They spend part of their life doing something remarkable. They invite children who have been bullied. They bring them over to their studio in California, and they take these children who have been bullied, who have learned what it feels like to be afraid, and they teach them jiu-jitsu. They teach them the art of self-defense. And they don't do it to make them fighters. They don't do it to necessarily make them dangerous, even though they become dangerous. They do it to give them back something that the fear stole. And that's confidence. That's the belief that they're no longer helpless. And if you look at it, that's what strength is. Strength gives someone confidence without asking them to surrender their humanity. And Bruce Wayne, he began in the exact same place. He wanted to make sure that himself or no other child would ever feel what he felt that moment. And there's nothing unhealthy about that. In fact, it's quite noble. It's what we were talking about that firefighters and policemen and teachers and parents all do. But somewhere along the way, that desire to become stronger became the need to become untouchable. And that's where everything changed. And so I would say that strength accepts vulnerability, but invincibility declares war on it. There's a psychologist named Erik Erikson, and he lived a beautiful life. He was born in 1902 and lived for 82 years, and he believed that childhood is a time of exploration. Children dream, and they dream about becoming teachers, musicians, pilots, scientists, artists, you name it, and that's what they dream it. They try on identities until one finally fits. But it was those 2 gunshots that took away that opportunity from Bruce Wayne. Those 2 gunshots made the decision for him. He didn't spend years asking, who do I now become? He spent years asking a different question. What kind of person could have stopped what happened? Every mile he traveled, every language he learned, every opponent he defeated, and every weapon he mastered, it was an attempt to answer that question. Until eventually Bruce Wayne stopped becoming a man and started becoming a mission. So remember our thesis. Every obsession begins by trying to solve a problem. Bruce Wayne's problem was helplessness. His solution to that problem was Batman. The tragedy is that somewhere between the promise and the mission, he forgot the promise was supposed to serve the man. Instead, the man began serving the promise. And that's the moment that passion quietly becomes obsession. And that brings us to our second question. When Bruce Wayne looked into the mirror, who was looking back? And I believe we can answer that by playing a game. I want you to tell me which one is pretending. It's either Bruce Wayne or Batman. Is it Bruce Wayne, the billionaire? He's laughing with politicians, dating celebrities, driving impossible cars. He's acting as though nothing in his life has ever gone wrong. Or is it Batman, standing alone on a rooftop, waiting for the next siren? So, who's the real person and who's the mask? And most people, without even thinking about it, would just answer without hesitation, Batman's the disguise, Bruce Wayne's the real person. Now, as we go through this episode, I hope you start to see that it's not necessarily true. I think Bruce Wayne becomes the disguise. And there's this interesting idea. It's from pop culture. It's about Superman. It comes from the Kill Bill series. And the argument goes something like this. Superman is who he really is. Clark Kent is actually the performance, the glasses, the awkward smile, the quiet reporter. those are the costumes that Superman wears. Now, I do believe there's a kernel of truth to that idea, but I don't think Superman's alone. I think Batman works exactly the same way. I really do believe that Bruce Wayne is the theater. Every smile is calculated, every joke is intentional, every tabloid headline is carefully planted. But when Bruce Wayne walks into the Batcave, everything changes. No cameras, no reporters, no pretending, no performance. It's just the mission. And the director, Christopher Nolan, I believe he quietly planted a clue to all of this. It was in the first film, Batman Begins. Most people never notice it, but take a look at it. Dr. Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow, mentions Carl Jung. And it's just one sentence. It's easy to miss. He references Jungian archetypes. Most people hear it and they move on, but I don't think Christopher Nolan wanted us to move on. I think he was handing us the key to the trilogy. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow, and it's not necessarily evil. It's just simply the person we could become under different circumstances. It's the version of ourselves we spend our lives trying not to become. Once you begin looking at Bruce Wayne through that lens, something remarkable happens. You stop seeing four villains and you begin seeing four mirrors. But before we get there, I want you to do something. Forget Bruce Wayne for a moment. Think about yourself. Who are you when no one's watching? Not what do you do or what have you accomplished, and not what do other people expect from you, but who are you? Because I wonder how many people listening to this have become so good at performing the version everyone else expects that they've forgotten who they were before the performance began. It's the successful businessman, the perfect mother, the dependable father, the strong friend, the funny one, the responsible one. Sometimes the role that helps us survive slowly becomes the only person anyone ever meets, including us. Bruce Wayne forgot who Bruce Wayne was because Batman never forgot who Batman needed to be. That's what obsession does. It doesn't steal your identity overnight. It whispers just one more hour, just one more promotion, just one more achievement, victory, mission, until one day someone asks, "Who are you?" And instead of answering with the people you love or the things that bring you joy, you answer with your job, your mission, your obsession. Remember our thesis. Every obsession begins by trying to solve a problem. Then, little by little, it begins solving every problem, until eventually it becomes your personality, your identity, your reason for getting up in the morning. Bruce Wayne didn't wake up one day and decide to become Batman. Batman slowly convinced Bruce Wayne that he was no longer necessary. Most people believe Bruce Wayne puts on the cape, but I think Batman has to put on Bruce Wayne. And I think that's the saddest thing about the Batman series, because if Batman is the real identity, then every party, every smile, every conversation, relationship, public appearance isn't Bruce Wayne living his life, it's Batman wearing a Bruce Wayne costume. Which brings us to the next stage of our investigation, because every obsession eventually creates a shadow, and every shadow eventually looks back. Now, as we look at the trilogy, we see that Christopher Nolan did something extraordinary with the villains. He never wrote 4 different enemies, he wrote 4 different futures. Every one of them shows Bruce Wayne what happens when obsession moves just one step further. Ra's al Ghul was never Bruce Wayne's opponent, he was Bruce Wayne without restraint. Both men believed Gotham was broken. Both believed the system had failed. Both believed someone had to act. The only difference was a single line, and Bruce Wayne refused to cross it. Then came the Joker. Most people believed that the Joker wanted to kill Batman, but that obviously wasn't true. He had the opportunities. In fact, he had countless opportunities. No, the Joker wanted something far more disturbing. He wanted Batman to prove him right. Because if Batman crossed that final line, if he killed anyone, then every sacrifice or sleepless night or broken bone or promise would lead to exactly the same destination. So the Joker didn't want Batman dead. He wanted Batman to become the next Joker. Then you have Harvey Dent. This one actually hurts because Harvey was never supposed to become Two-Face. Harvey was Bruce Wayne's exit strategy. Bruce never wanted to be Batman forever. He wanted Gotham to build itself to no longer need Batman. And to Batman, Harvey represented that possibility. Harvey could actually save the city without hiding behind a mask. And then, after the Joker got his way on one terrible night, it completely destroyed Batman. Bruce Wayne didn't just lose Harvey Dent, he lost the future he had been building toward. Rachel was gone, Harvey was gone. And just like that moment at 8 years old, he once again feels helpless. The door back to Bruce Wayne quietly closes. And now we get to the apex villain. It's the pinnacle, the summit, the culmination of all these evil characters into one. In fact, it was in comic number 497 in the books that shows that Bane actually broke Batman's back. So Christopher Nolan did a historically accurate presentation of the comic and showing that Bane was so powerful that he could remove Batman from the picture. And it shows us that obsession begins by believing it has become indestructible. But as life always does, it introduces us to something stronger. You see, Bane didn't simply break Bruce Wayne's body. Bane broke the illusion Bruce Wayne had about himself. And that's that Batman could solve every problem, that he had the preparation to eliminate any pain. And Bane broke the illusion that enough discipline could silence the frightened little boy still standing in the rain. So once again, let's go back to our thesis. Every obsession begins by trying to solve a problem and ends by becoming one. Bruce Wayne spent 20 years trying to save an 8-year-old boy. He never realized that little boy wasn't asking to become invincible. He was asking to be comforted. And maybe that's why Bruce Wayne never found peace. Because you can't fight grief. You can't out-train it, you can't outwork it, and you can't even outsmart it. The only thing you can do with grief is walk through it. And that brings us to our verdict. Did Batman save Bruce Wayne, or did Batman replace him? And I think the answer's both. Batman did save Gotham. He gave criminals something to fear. He became a symbol. But unfortunately, symbols pay a price. They don't get to fall apart. They don't get to grieve. They don't get to be human. But people do. And somewhere beneath the armor, the cowl, the mission, the 20 years of obsession, there was still a little boy who missed Thomas and Martha, and who never stopped waiting for them to come home. But then, something remarkable happens. Bruce Wayne fails. Bane took everything away, the gadgets, the cave, the certainty, the illusion that Batman was enough. And it shows us that sometimes the greatest gift life gives us is failure. Because failure forces us to become someone other than the person we've been pretending to be. And you'll all remember the part where Bruce Wayne stops pretending. It's at the very end of the whole trilogy. The Dark Knight Rises finishes with the scene where Alfred sits in a cafe and across from him he sees Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is not wearing a cape and he has no mission and no performance. It's finally just Bruce. For 20 years, Bruce Wayne tried to save that rainy night, and he couldn't. No one could. The past can't be rescued. It can only be understood and accepted and perhaps forgiven. So, was it worth it? Gotham did survive, but Bruce Wayne almost didn't. So let's take a moment and look at this as a case file, and we're going to close it here, and hopefully we'll make it under the 30-minute mark. This case file is going to be Bruce Wayne, and we'll do this for every single one of the characters in the second season, every single episode. We'll give the wound, the promise, the obsession, the shadow, the cost, and finally the verdict. And so once again, this is Bruce Wayne, and we see that the wound was the murder of his parents. The promise he makes to himself is no one will ever feel this helpless again, including himself. That was the whole mission. The promise was, I will make myself into the type of person that will never allow this to happen again. And so that becomes the obsession. The obsession is becoming untouchable. The shadow is Batman became the man. Bruce Wayne became the mask. It costed him 20 years of his identity. That was the cost. 20 years. The verdict? The mission did succeed, and the man almost didn't. In the next episode, we travel to a galaxy far, far away, and we investigate a man history remembers as someone who lusted for power. But what if history got this person wrong? What if this person didn't fall because he wanted more power? What if he fell because he loved too much? Well, I'll let you decide. I'm Bobby Garrison, and this is Dark Margins. I'll see you in the next chapter.